Hi there, Alex Kidman from Fatback Tech, taking a look at Apple's latest tablet, the iPad Air 2. Now, according to the Apple marketing machine, this is the lightest, thinnest, most powerful iPad ever. But is it worth buying? It's an interesting proposition for me because I've got an iPad Air, last year's model, and a lot of the differences between the two are subtle. Some of them are not so much. So what I'm going to do over the next couple of reviews is compare and contrast a few. There are a few other tablets that I want to bring into the equation as well that are worth your time and consideration. But the iPad Air is, I think, the obvious consideration point to start off with. I've only had this for a couple of hours, so these are very much just some initial observations. I'll get onto battery testing, camera, games, and applications a little bit later. First impressions, though, are pretty good. Apple, whilst it has a pretty powerful marketing machine, doesn't make rubbish products. It tends to make fairly premium design products, and yeah, I do think that the iPad Air 2 fits that definition. Its obvious big selling point is, yes, it's the thinnest tablet that Apple's ever made. And I'm a little bit torn on this because whilst I appreciate the engineering and I appreciate that getting things a little bit thinner can often take an awful lot more engineering work than you might appreciate, there's a bit of a battle at Apple between design and usability. And this is a beautifully designed product, don't get me wrong. But the usability stakes, I'm not quite so convinced. And again, I'm coming at this from the perspective of an iPad Air owner. But the issue with this particularly thin iPad Air 2 is one that actually affects anyone coming from any other iPad. Because the big design change that they've made is getting rid of the mute or rotation lock, which is how I tended to use it, switch on the side. That may not be a big thing to you. To me, it was an option, it was a choice, it was a feature, and it's a feature that the iPad Air 2 just plain doesn't have. You've still got the volume buttons down the side, but no switch. The thinness is also reflected in the fact that this is an iPad with no air gap behind the glass, and that means that it's got lower reflectivity. I've already seen that in action, and yeah, that's quite nice. It's a fairly subtle kind of thing. I don't think too many people were being blinded by iPads as it was, but in direct sunlight, yes, it does make a bit of a difference. In pure benchmark terms, the new A8X processor, yeah, it's a bit of a beast. If you like your benchmark numbers, this one scores really highly. Benchmarks, of course, only tell half the story because it's down to the individual applications. And here again, Apple's done something quite interesting with the iPad Air 2. They've thrown 2 gig of RAM in there. Previous iPads only ever had 1 or less. And that means that there's a bit more headroom for running more intensive applications. Still, I think in some ways the processor is more a future-proofing thing. I doubt too many developers are going to be developing thinking we only want the iPad Air 2 market. No, they're going to develop for all the iPads that are out there. This will just run them a bit faster, and you've probably got a bit more leeway in terms of future iOS releases with it. What else is new on the hardware? Well, the other obvious headline feature is Touch ID. Touch ID is really welcome on a tablet. It's nice, it's fun, it's simple to use, and I've tried them all. Nobody does it quite as well as Apple. That does not mean that Touch ID is foolproof, but the other solutions that I have tried for fingerprint recognition always fall short of the mark. Touch ID gets it right most of the time. Ergo, it's a better solution for unlocking your tablet. So what about that iPad Air comparison? Well, I'm holding both here, and obviously the iPad Air, that's this little chap, is a tiny bit heavier and a tiny bit thicker than the iPad Air 2. But not so much that my arms are going to fall off. Ideally, I would have this, and normally I do have this in a case, and I'd certainly suggest anyone buying an iPad Air 2 still buy a case for it. Whilst it's got a nice solid metal, and you're probably not going to have that whole bending story that we had with the iPhone 6 Plus, we're still looking at something that if you drop it face first, it's going to shatter into billions of pieces. I have no doubt about that, and sorry, but I can't quite afford to test that for you right now. It's also an interesting comparison because Apple is still selling the original iPad, and this is a new step for them. They've got a really wide range. You can get the original Mini, you can get the Mini 2, which is last year's Mini Retina, you can get the Mini 3, don't know why you'd bother. You can get the iPad Air, you can get the iPad Air 2. So you've actually got a lot of choices in this market. On straight processor grounds, on Touch ID grounds, yes, this is a nice evolution, but at the moment that's really all it's striking me as. As mentioned, I'm going to take a couple of days to do battery testing, so that video won't be out for a couple of days. In the meantime though, if you'd like to leave any comments, if there's anything you'd like examined, anything that you'd like looked at, or anything you'd like my commentary on, feel free to leave a comment below. If you've enjoyed this video, check out my others, and please subscribe.